So as you can see from the title, I did cave. I went ahead and copped the S23 Ultra. There was just way too many things kind of coming out as we started to see, early reviewers get their hands on it that I was like, you know what? I really want to test that. I really want to see what the difference is for myself. So as you can see, went ahead and picked up S23 Ultra in that Phantom Black colorway. And in today's video, we'll go ahead and take a look at my first impressions. As of now, I've had the device for just the weekend, so I'll be able to give some really early first impressions. Nothing super definitive, but I at least wanted you all to see and kind of hear my thoughts so far. So with that being said, let's get into it. This is the Galaxy S23 Ultra after the weekend. So first thing I want to go ahead and talk about are the things that I'm not noticing any real difference or that doesn't seem to really have changed or been improved, just because that list is, significantly smaller than the other, than the other side of that coin. So to kick things off, both of the things that I'm going to talk about here are in regards to the camera. So at this point, I haven't been able to like really dive in and fully test out the camera in its entirety, mainly because here in Florida, the weather hasn't been the greatest. It's been really bleak and rainy, not the sunny, bright and shiny that everybody's used to seeing on, Florida advertisements and postcards. So haven't really been able to get out and get this thing, tested in terms of them cameras. But what I will go ahead and say right off the bat is the few pictures that I did take side by side, I didn't notice a ton of difference between S23 Ultra and S22 Ultra. Now, again, whether that's due to me just not having, that type of time to really take a bunch of photos is left to be seen. So I don't want to say anything definitive. I don't want to say, the cameras haven't been improved or the 200 megapixel sensor is a gimmick and all of that, just because I really haven't had enough time with it. So give me a little bit of time and I'll definitely get to that in the full review. The one thing I can say definitely has not changed is shutter lag is still there. So and the thing is with shutter lag, I'm gonna stop calling it shutter lag because it's not exactly shutter lag. The shutter itself, when it fires, there is no lag with it. It doesn't drop any frames or anything. What it is more of like a delay of when you tap the shutter. Now, even though there's not an improvement to it, and this will kind of pivot us going into the things that I did notice change in regards to my impressions. What I did notice is while, yes, shutter lag is still there, there is a setting, and I'll actually go ahead and get to it now. There are a couple of extra settings that Samsung built in to kind of help mitigate that, right? So we can go ahead and get into it and talk to them here and now. So first things first, when you go into your camera settings, if you have the camera assistant good lock module installed, great, it'll show up there. If you don't, in order to get these extra shutter features, go and download the camera assistant good lock module. If you don't know what good lock is, I have a whole dedicated video to it. That way you can kind of get an idea of exactly what good lock is. But let's go ahead and click into it. Now, when you go in, first thing, a lot of the stuff is going to look similar, but what I really want to draw your focus to is going to be the quick tap shutter. Now, this isn't changing anything about the shutter. It doesn't make the shutter, go faster, doesn't make it go slower or anything like that. All this toggle does is the way that Samsung's smartphone, camera shutter works is when you tap the actual shutter button is not when it takes the picture. It takes the picture when you release the shutter button. So when you tap the shutter button, to take a picture, it's waiting for your finger to come off the shutter to send that, signal to your ISP or to the CPU, and that's when that shutter will go off or fire. What this toggle does is it switches that. So it makes it way more reminiscent of other smartphones, where as soon as you tap that shutter button, picture immediately goes off and fires. So just toggling this setting here has already helped immensely in terms of like the delay that I would see with the shutter. So before you go in and start messing with any of these other settings that I'm about to show you, toggle that on, give it a try and get a feel for it and get used to just this one first. See if that, mitigates it for you. It doesn't 100% resolve the issue. Samsung, we're still waiting on you to fully 100% fix it. I'm not sure if it's something that they need more time in software or hardware, whatever, but this kind of helps mitigate it, for the foreseeable future. Now, if you dive into the capture settings, you'll see that or capture speed, I'm sorry, you actually see that you have more options here. So you have one at the very top, and this is for regular resolutions. So prioritize quality, prioritize speed, or you got a balance of speed and quality. I'm not touching anything here just yet because I don't want to affect my photo quality. I want every photo that comes out of me shooting with this camera to be the absolute best that it can be. So right now I'm just getting used to the quick tap shutter button, but that has, really helped, my kind of experience with the camera set on the S23 Ultra. So like I said, if shutter lag was something that kind of, got to you in the past, I'm not going to sit here and say it's fully gone or it's fully taken care of. There are a few options in there, but at least the quick tap shutter button makes it, manageable. I'm getting significantly less blurred, moving object photos than I was getting before. So that's definitely something I wanted to make a call out on. Now kind of pivoting fully to the things that I did notice a difference in, like immediately noticed a difference. So first thing, we'll go ahead and bring it back to design. So when you look at the S23 Ultra, it looks very reminiscent of the S22 Ultra. Speaking of which, I want to go ahead and bring the S22 Ultra here on cam with me so I can kind of demonstrate. I'm going to pull it out of the case here. Now, the one difference that I immediately noticed, and before I even pre-ordered, I went and checked out the S23 Ultra at Best Buy, and as soon as I laid hands on it, I immediately noticed the difference. And I'm just gonna hold these together, and I'm gonna see if you guys kind of got the little tape peeling up, but I'm gonna see if you guys can kind of see that. So the S22 Ultra is way more rounded, and the S23 Ultra is more of that boxy shape. And I'm definitely a fan of the more boxy feel of the S23 Ultra. It feels deliberate in your hand, if that's the best way to put it. Like, it feels more deliberate because you kind of have those edges rather than it just being rounded. Also, when you're using your S Pen, let me go ahead and pull the S Pen out. When you're using your S Pen, and you kind of get like to the edge of the screen, you don't have to necessarily worry about, anything in regards to the pen like sliding off the display or anything like that, because the actual curvature of the display is way more subtle. So you don't have to really worry about a situation where like you're, writing a sentence and you get to that edge and it's like, kind of falling off or not registering. So that was a good look. I do, like I said, like that in regards to what Samsung is doing with the S Pen. So definitely good to see, or not the S Pen, I'm sorry, with the curvature of the screen. So like I said, I'm definitely a fan of it because I'm someone who, doesn't want curved screens to necessarily go away in its entirety. I like the way curved screens look. I just want it to, still function great regardless if I'm using my S Pen to write or not. So that's kind of my thing in terms of design. Everything else, besides, like, you can kind of see on the camera housing how they have like the little rings. Besides that, phone looks exactly the same as the S22 Ultra, and I don't necessarily see that as a bad thing. I really love this design. And I love that they're kind of just refining what they already have. One of the biggest mistakes you kind of see some manufacturers do is they try to kind of reinvent the wheel every year instead of taking years to polish and refine what they already have. So I'm definitely cool with Samsung doing it in that regard, and I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next thing, which is going to be battery. Battery. So I did notice that the battery is significantly better than what it was on the S22 Ultra, and that's while the S23 Ultra is still learning my usage. So it hasn't learned my usage fully, it's still learning my usage, but I did pull a couple of screenshots, so I'm going to pull those up here. Give me 1 second. Not that one yet. This one here. So this is the first one. This is when I took the phone out of the box, set everything up on it. And when I was done setting everything up, the battery was about, I'm going to say between 45 and 50, like 3 or 4%. Somewhere in between there is where the battery was when I unplugged it from my S22 Ultra from moving over all my data and stuff. I was still obviously, signing into applications and doing all of that stuff. But the battery was about, between 45 and 55%. And I still ended at 1% with a screen on time of 3 hours and 48 minutes. Now, let's say, for example, we were to just double that as if I had, the full 100%. That's easily over 7 hours of screen on time. And that's off of that initial, just taking it off the charger. It hasn't learned my usage. My first day with the phone, I'm going heavy with it. You see a little bit of camera usage there, some YouTube, some Twitter, and obviously some Teams for work. So definitely a strong showing in that regard. Now I'm going to fast forward to the end of my first real day using the phone, which was yesterday, Saturday. And that ended here. Now, this is really good in my opinion. 13 and a half hours off the charger completely. screen on time of 8 hours and 26 minutes, which I've never gotten 8 hours out of my S22 Ultra, period. I want to say for that device, I usually ended up with an average of about 5.5 to 6 hours of screen on time was about my usual with that. So just the fact that I'm getting 8.5 hours of screen on time with this device, and as you can see, still learning my usage there in the right side, it's only going to get better. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say it's going to get an hour and a half or 2 hours better, right? But historically, depending on the Android smartphone, I've seen differences of about 35, 45 minutes, sometime a full hour. So even if I got an extra hour out of this once it learns my usage, that's almost 10 hours of screen on time from an Android phone. Like, we're used to seeing numbers that high from like iPhones. So in my opinion, battery life, super solid so far. I can't wait to see definitively where this lands once it's done learning my usage, but it's been an absolute pleasure to use. And then we can even kind of take a look at my battery usage thus far. Let me go ahead and bring up the battery. Today hasn't been too heavy, but I actually did do a standby drain test. So I actually pulled the phone. I charged the phone to 100% and I pulled it off the charger, before I went to bed, and I just let the phone, and you can kind of see that real steep line there. I let the phone kind of do its thing in standby. And when I woke up the next morning, I had only lost like 3% in terms of battery life. Absolutely strong showing. And again, this is still learning my usage. Always on display, obviously turned on. The performance mode, I keep it in standard mode. I haven't tested light mode yet. And then obviously for the display, I always immediately switch it to Quad HD. If I'm spending $1,200, you better believe I'm running that bad boy at Quad HD. But this is what we're looking at so far. 9 hours and 25 minutes off the charger altogether. Because remember, I did, have it sitting overnight with the always on display on. And then screen on time, 2 hours and 50 minutes or 2 hours and 49 minutes. And that's what 70% battery life, with 70% battery life. So this is definitely on track to hit, 8.5 hours of screen on time yet again. So super, super strong showing from Samsung in terms of battery so far. Really enjoying what I'm seeing with this particular device. I don't know what type of wizardry they were able to kind of, take care of. Let me lower that brightness a bit. But like I said, I don't know what type of wizardry they were able to take care of with this particular device, but I'm absolutely loving how good the battery life is on this particular device. Now, the last thing I want to go ahead and get into before we wrap it up has to be the overall performance. I went on record when I did my Fold 4 full review, and I mentioned that the Fold 4 had surpassed the S series in terms of software performance and animations and fluidity. And I meant it. But not only has this device, caught up to the Fold line in regards to software performance, it's surpassed it. It's honestly surpassed it. Now, I don't know if that's more from the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, if it's more from Samsung's optimizations with One UI 5.1. It could even be a combination of both. Honestly, we won't know until, like S22 Ultra gets Android 5 or gets One UI 5.1, then we'll kind of be able to see. But everything from every animation, absolute butter smooth. Animations when going in folders and going back, absolutely butter. And I think the thing for me with Samsung, it was never that their animations were just trash or just completely bad. It was the inconsistency. Like, depending on what you were doing, you never quite knew what to expect in terms of your animations. Like, you could be running, YouTube, and I'll just throw up YouTube, and then you could be running let's launch Twitter with it too. Like, I could be running these two apps side by side and go to close out of it, and I wouldn't know what type of animation I was gonna get. I didn't know if it was gonna be stuttery, janky, laggy. Like, you just never really knew because the consistency just wasn't there. Whereas like now, consistency is 100% there in terms of all animations. No matter what I'm doing on the phone, everything is butter smooth. I haven't had any issues. Like, this device is finally marking a turning point for Samsung in terms of their software performance, where I feel like a lot of the third-party Android manufacturers already are. Where you still have Google, who, kind of leads the pack in that regard. Even if I'm looking at like MIUI and Origin OS and Color OS, like, I still prefer what Pixel does with the fluidity and the speed. But I never complain about the animations on those other devices because it's not it's not to a point where it's something that I noticed. They're still butter, they're still smooth, they're still great. Samsung has finally hit that target. So in terms of animations, I'm gonna keep it real. As long as they keep it this fluid or continue to build on this, you guys will never hear me say anything about Samsung animations ever again. So super, super happy about that. But all in all, that's my first weekend with the Galaxy S23 Ultra. Like I said, I wanted to try to keep this as concise as possible because there's still a lot about this device that I have not tested, but there was some good there, right? And I think with a lot of the conversation around this phone being, oh, it's not worth the upgrade, or they didn't really change anything, or it's the most overhyped phone out right now, and things like that. I really wanted to draw some light and kind of give praise where praise is due. I feel like sometimes we get so lost as tech enthusiasts in regards to what devices people may be coming from, or what things certain people might find beneficial. Like I can say, like, the animation change may not be a big deal for a lot of people, for majority of people, but that was something that really stuck out to me and that I really, really am happy that they improved. So you never know what has people on the fence in terms of upgrading. So wanted to call out some of the benefits and some of the praise. Samsung so far, absolutely fantastic job. The S23 Ultra is shaping up to be a definite beast and a phone of the year contender, but obviously that's not where the coverage stops. This is just the first stop on a long journey with this particular device. So definitely hit that like and subscribe button. That way you don't miss any videos on this device or anything else that's featured on the channel. As always, this is Ike's Tech Talk. I'll catch you all in the next video. Peace.